Hello, Darnell. How are you?
Doing well, gentlemen. How you guys doing?
We are doing really well. Apparently, not as well as DeMar, like getting a Kings welcome by the Sacramento Kings faithful. You described in your piece in the Athletic. I think it's really interesting. Like I think it's a strong move for Sacramento, but I was a little surprised that they celebrated it the way that they did.
When I had to remind myself, Lawrence, of how bad the Sacramento Kings organization has been since the Vlade Divac, Chris Webber, Doug Christie, Jason Williams guys, that era. I mean, they missed the playoffs for 16 straight years before 2 seasons ago. And then they messed around and missed it again last year. So that's how much pain and heartbreak the Kings fans have felt. And you can understand that reaction and that response when they get a six-time All-Star like DeMar DeRozan, who historically players like that haven't gone to Sacramento. So you can understand that reaction.
Yeah, I won't have any Brad Miller erasure on this show either, because that's a former Bull that deserves respect on his name as well. So, Darnell, with this move and what is probably coming, the Bulls are going to be in a position to be bad enough to keep their top 10 protected pick for next year while also trying out some upside plays. I don't know where you think Chris Duarte fits in to their current roster, but as it stands, there's going to be a lot of young players who are going to be getting minutes and opportunity that they weren't afforded elsewhere.
Yeah, I'm not, high on the Chris Duarte move, just because I think it's just kind of filler and he might not be a long-term piece, but he has an opportunity to become a long-term part of this Bulls roster as they're rebuilding and trying to do it in a way that I don't think is tanking. I think it's more they're going to continue to be competitive and put their faith in some of these young players like Josh Giddey, like Kobe White, like Patrick Williams, who they just lavished with the $18 million per year contract and continue to show faith in him. Ayo Dosunmu's in that mix as well. And so if you can get a Chris Duarte to develop like you're hoping from Dalen Terry and Julian Phillips, you got a lot of different young players who you are expecting to make improvements. You've seen that historically from guys 21 through 25. So there's no reason to think that the Bulls can't do that here, but I just don't know that they're going to be bad enough to keep that top 10 pick. I'm
Oh,
going to write
they,
about it for the
they
Athletic.
better be. They
I
can't screw
really,
this up.
I've got my concerns. I don't think, especially like they got to move Zach, they got to move Vooch. If Lonzo Ball can come back and help, that's going to hurt in terms of them keeping that top 10 pick. So they've still got a lot of work ahead of them in terms of getting bad enough to keep that pick.
What do you think is important to note about DeMar DeRozan's time in Chicago?
I believe, I mentioned this in the piece I did at The Athletic, where the Bulls had missed the playoffs 4 straight years before getting DeRozan. And the first year that they get him, they win 46 games. They make the playoffs. The injury-ravaged roster obviously loses, has no chance against the Milwaukee Bucks. But the way that he raised the professionalism of this organization, the standard of this organization, this franchise, I think he deserves a lot of credit for showing up to play. I think it was more than 90% of the games available to play in, he actually appeared in. So he just showed up to work every day and raised the standard for the Chicago Bulls organization.
Yeah, and it seemed like he relished the opportunity too. Like Dan and I were discussing it earlier that he seemed okay. Not everyone is built for the uncle phase. Like a lot of people bristle at it. He seemed to live in that space, like being comfortable with who he was, but also being there to help younger players.
To a fault almost at times, Lawrence. I mean, it didn't matter what the Bulls were up against. It didn't matter which players or teammates of his were out with injuries. He just said, bring them, line them up, and he was going to try his best to knock them down. And it didn't make sense to a degree. And you always could see, you mentioned earlier that the writing was on the wall, that this team wasn't going anywhere as currently constructed. And for a 35-year-old player and is going into his 16th season, you just wondered how much longer would the Bulls and DeRozan try to make this work, and when it clearly wasn't. And so it was time for both sides to move on. But DeMar DeRozan never complained. He never looked at it like he got the short end of the stick or anything like that. He always showed up and did his best to help the Chicago Bulls win.
Darnell, I saw KC make mention of this, and you were also witness to it. He mentioned something that I didn't even think of, that DeMar also was always available for you guys. And that's something where there were a lot of tough losses over the last couple of years, and there didn't seem to be a lot of tapping out by him when it came to the press responsibilities after a game.
Yeah, I don't know, what Casey said, but there was a very different response between DeRozan and Levine. You could always tell the difference between how they both interacted with the media, the level of responsibility or accountability that each one took. And, you could see the maturation of DeMar DeRozan from when he was in Toronto until when he came to Chicago, and just how he became not just a superstar, but also a model citizen on and off the floor. And that professionalism really, I think, came through in his interviews with us after tough losses, after big wins. He sort of was ho-hum after those game winners, but then also, after some of the biggest disappointments, he stood up and answered the call each and every time. And that's sort of the professionalism that I'm talking about with DeMar DeRozan.
I don't know if this is something that you might be writing or The Athletic might be putting together, but we were talking about 3-year Bulls. Like, where in a 3-year Bulls career would we find the best? Can we put together a starting 5 of all-time 3-year Bulls? We've got 3, because one is DeMar, one is Dennis Rodman, and a texter pointed out that might end up being the best, Bob Boozer. His age 29, 30, and 31 seasons, including in 67-68, his lone All-Star season. His 3-year run as a Bull was, with any team, his highest, most productive scoring and rebounding averages. So I think that would be sort of an interesting exercise. I saw, Nate Thurmond was 2 years. Ben Wallace was 2 years.
Why are you trying to give Darnell more work, though?
Sorry, it's that time of year where we're always looking for stuff to do.
Not in the NBA.
My question is this: does it have to be 3 years exactly? That's kind of like one of those stats. The first player to get 50% shooting, 40%, 90%, 2 steals.
Yes,
3 rebounds.
I call them threshold stats. Those are fun. And by the way, when you do those with DeMar, especially by NBA age, he's walking with legends. If you look at what DeMar's production has been, in large part because of minutes and because of what he's been able to do, you're talking about after a certain age, walking with Alex English and Karl Malone and LeBron and some of these guys. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, he was a phenomenal player for the Bulls. Fascinating subject to cover, and the way he goes about his business. I wrote in The Athletic, he showed the young guys like Dalen Terry, like Ayo Dosunmu and Patrick Williams, what it takes to be great. What greatness is made of. And we got to see a glimpse of that for 3 seasons. It's unfortunate that the Bulls couldn't stay healthy and then ultimately couldn't surround him with enough help to push past that first round, the first year of his arrival. So it was a pleasure to cover DeMar DeRozan. I'll always have fond memories from these last 3 seasons, but in large part because of him. So looking forward to seeing what this new direction looks like now with Josh Giddey and Patrick Williams on a new contract.
Yeah. Patrick Williams got the deal that I think a lot of people like, wow, $90 million for a guy that is seemingly unavailable and hasn't reached his potential yet. But that's the going rate for a player like that, a 3-and-D guy. Do the Bulls think, and should we take the contract as meaning they think that there is still a really high developmental ceiling for Patrick Williams?
Yes, absolutely. And they continue to show faith in him from the day they drafted him 4th overall. I think it was 2020. And the injuries are unfortunate. You can't really say that he's injury prone, but I've heard that he's still not healthy from this foot injury. And so that does make you kind of wonder if there are some issues with his body, if he's going to linger, not just with this injury, but any injury that comes over the lifespan of this new contract. And so there are some major questions that are following Patrick Williams, even though he has the money. But now he's, the runway is being cleared. again, they've got to figure out something to do with Levine and Vucevic, perhaps Lonzo Ball, but Patrick Williams has no more reason to say, you know, he's got to defer to this person or that person. I can't wait to see what he brings in his 5th season.
Wait, he's still hurt?
Yeah, I've heard he's not fully healthy from that. So we got to see what kind of update we get from the Bulls here.
That's scary.
Well, we better not find out that we're going to start down that classic Bulls road now of exploratory this and active rest. Not with that money.
Yeah, not with signing a long-term deal.
The ink's still wet on there. Wow.